Welcome to r/maliciouscompliance, where a stupid boss fires his most valuable employee. And the malicious compliance title story starts like this. I still remember the exact moment my former boss handed me that termination letter with the smuggest grin I'd ever seen on his face. The severance check attached to it was for exactly $10, not 10,000, $10. Consider yourself lucky that you're getting anything at all, he said, leaning back in his chair like he had just pulled off the deal of the century. But let me back up and explain how I ended up in this situation, because the whole thing is absolutely ridiculous. So I worked as a senior software engineer for a mid-sized tech company that specialized in security protocols and encryption software, nothing too flashy, but we had some major clients in the financial sector who relied on our products to keep their systems secure. I've been with the company for about 6 years at this point, and I was damn good at my job. I'm not trying to brag here, by the way, but I need you to understand the context. I was not just good. I was literally ranked #1 in the world on a competitive programming platform that industry professionals use to benchmark their skills. #1 out of millions of users globally. This ranking was not just some vanity metric either. Major tech companies actively recruited from the top 100 users on this platform. Being in the top 10 meant that you were the elite. Being #1 meant that you were the best of the best. I'd maintained that ranking for almost 2 years through consistent competition, and our company's entire security infrastructure was built on code that I'd either written or significantly optimized. The encryption protocols we sold to banks, mine. The authentication systems that processed transactions, also mine. My work was not just important, it was essential to the company's survival. Then corporate decided to restructure and we got a new director of engineering, let's call him boss, because honestly that's all he ever wanted to be called. This guy came from a completely different industry, had a business degree, but virtually no technical background, and somehow convinced the executives that he was going to revolutionize our development process. From day one, boss made it clear he did not like me. I think it bothered him that I knew more about our products than he ever would, and that I had a reputation both inside and outside the company. During meetings, when he would suggest something technically impossible or just plain stupid, I would politely explain why it would not work and offer alternative solutions. And just to be clear, I never tried to embarrass him. I was genuinely just trying to do my job and keep our products functioning properly, but my boss saw any kind of pushback as insubordination. He wanted yes men, not engineers who actually understood what they were doing, and things came to a head during a client presentation. One of our biggest banking clients was concerned about a potential vulnerability in our latest update. Boss was trying to sound knowledgeable and told them that the concern was unfounded and that our system was completely impenetrable. I watched the client's technical team exchange worried glances because they clearly knew that was nonsense. No system is completely impenetrable, and claiming otherwise is exactly the kind of arrogance that leads to major security breaches. After the meeting, I pulled boss aside and explained that we needed to take the client's concern seriously and run additional penetration testing. I even volunteered to personally oversee it during my own time. "Are you questioning my judgment?" he asked, his face getting red. I tried to explain that I was just following security best practices, but he cut me off and told me to stay in my lane. 3 days later, I ran the tests anyway because I actually cared about our client's security. Well, it turns out there was a vulnerability exactly where the client's team suspected. I fixed it immediately and documented everything, but when my boss found out, he absolutely lost it. Called me into his office and started yelling about how I had gone rogue and undermined his authority. I showed him the vulnerability report and explained that if that flaw had been exploited, our client could have faced a massive data breach. "I don't care about your little reports," he said. "You went behind my back and that's unacceptable. You think you're so smart with your little computer rankings, but you clearly don't understand how a real business works." That's when I knew this was not gonna end well. The question is for who? Over the next few weeks, my boss started nitpicking everything I did. He would reject my code reviews for arbitrary reasons, exclude me from important meetings, and constantly make snide comments about my attitude problem. He even started circulating this narrative that I was difficult to work with and didn't collaborate well with the team, which was complete garbage, by the way. I had mentored half the junior developers in the company and had great relationships with everyone except him. The final straw came during a quarterly review. Boss had apparently been building a case against me, documenting every tiny disagreement and framing my technical corrections as refusal to follow direction. He sat me down with an HR representative present and told me that my performance was substandard and that I lacked the skills necessary to continue in my role. I actually laughed because it was so absurd. Here was this guy who couldn't code his way out of a paper bag telling me, the literally #1 ranked competitive programmer in the world, that I lacked skills. This is a joke, right? I asked. The HR rep looked uncomfortable, but boss just smirked. He said, "I'm deadly serious. You've been a problem since day one and frankly, you suck at your job. I'm terminating your employment effective immediately." He slid the termination letter across the desk, and that's when I saw the severance check. $10. He had actually put in writing that my 6 years of service, my critical contributions to the company's core products, and my literal world-class expertise were worth exactly $10. "You are firing me with a $10 severance?" I asked, still not quite believing that this was actually happening. "Company policy says I have to offer severance for termination without cause," boss said, clearly enjoying himself. "Well, it doesn't specify how much. Consider it a reflection of how much value you've actually provided." The HR rep looked like she wanted to crawl under the table, but she didn't say anything. I later found out that boss had somehow convinced upper management that this was a justified termination and that the minimal severance was appropriate given my performance issues. Now here's where the malicious compliance comes in. I looked at the termination letter very carefully. It stated that I was being terminated immediately and that I was required to return all company property, cease all access to company systems, and provide reasonable cooperation with the transition of my responsibilities. That last part was key. "So you want me to stop working immediately?" I asked. "Well, that's what effective immediately means," my boss said condescendingly. "And I need to return all company property and cease all access? Are you having trouble understanding basic English?" He sneered. I smiled. "Not at all. I just want to make sure I comply with your instructions exactly." I stood up, pulled out my company laptop, set it on his desk, and then I removed my access badge and company phone and placed those next to it. "Well, then here you go, all company property returned. I will send you a detailed list of everything I was working on, along with documentation of all my current projects and responsibilities. You asked for reasonable cooperation with the transition, so I will provide exactly that. A comprehensive handover document." Boss looked pleased with himself. "Good, HR will escort you out." What boss didn't understand, because he had no technical knowledge whatsoever, it was that I was not just another engineer, I was the engineer. Almost every critical system the company ran was either built by me or depended on code I'd written, and while I'd always been happy to help my colleagues and share knowledge, a huge amount of institutional knowledge existed solely in my head. True to my word, I spent the next 3 days writing the most comprehensive handover document you've ever seen. It was over 200 pages long and detailed every single thing I'd been responsible for. Every system, every piece of code, every quirk, workaround, every optimization, every security consideration, I documented it all in excruciating technical detail, but here's the thing about technical documentation written by someone who truly understands what they are doing. If you don't have the expertise to understand it, it might as well be written in ancient Greek. And boss had specifically told me to cease all access to company systems and stop working immediately. So while I provided the most thorough documentation possible, I was not available to explain any of it or answer questions that would be working, and I'd been explicitly terminated and told to stop immediately with the work. I sent the document to boss and HR and confirmed that I'd fulfilled my obligation to provide reasonable cooperation with the transition, and then I went on vacation. I turned off my phone, blocked my work email, and spent 2 weeks on a beach not thinking about code or encryption or the boss's stupid face. When I got back and finally checked my personal email, I had dozens of messages from former colleagues, so the company was apparently in complete chaos. It started small. One of our automated security systems had encountered an edge case that triggered a false positive. Normally, I would have fixed this in about 10 minutes because I had built a system and I knew exactly where the tolerance thresholds were set, but I was not there, and the documentation explaining how to adjust those thresholds required understanding the underlying mathematical models I'd implemented. The team spent 3 days trying to figure it out before they just disabled that security layer entirely, which left the system vulnerable. Then one of our major banking clients reported that transaction processing times had increased significantly. This was because of an optimization I'd implemented that required periodic maintenance to clear certain cache structures. I've always done this manually because it was faster than automating it, and I documented the process in my handover. But the documentation assumed a certain level of understanding about how the caching system works, and without that context, the new team could not even figure out which cache structures to clear or when. Processing times kept getting worse, and a week after I left, there was a critical security patch that needed to be deployed. I'd written the deployment scripts for our entire infrastructure, and they were highly customized to account for all sorts of specific quirks in our system architecture. The scripts were documented, but again, using them required actually understanding what they were doing. The team tried to run the deployment and ended up taking down production systems for 6 hours. 6 hours of downtime for a major financial services provider. The client was furious. Boss apparently was running around like a chicken with its head cut off, insisting that I must have sabotaged something on my way out. He had IT forensics go through everything, trying to find evidence that I'd planted some kind of logic bomb or malicious code, but of course they found nothing, because I hadn't done anything wrong. I simply stopped working when told to stop working and provided documentation as requested. But here's what Boss had not considered. You cannot just replace someone who's literally the best in the world at what they do, but they tried. They posted my position and offered a salary that was actually higher than what I'd been making. They got applications from some decent programmers, but nobody with anywhere near my expertise. The few candidates who were truly qualified took one look at the situation, the unstable systems, the recent outages, the panicking management, and noped right out of there. Meanwhile, the problems kept piling up. Another client discovered a bug in one of our encryption libraries. Normally, I would have patched it in an hour. The current team took 2 weeks, and their patch actually introduced a new vulnerability. Our authentication system started experiencing random crashes because a background process I'd written was not being maintained properly. The database optimization scripts I'd created started timing out because nobody understood how to tune the parameters for different loads. I heard all of this through my former colleagues who kept me updated because they felt terrible about what had happened. They had tried to speak up when Boss fired me, but he had shut them down and told them that nobody was irreplaceable. It turns out some people kind of are though. And by the way guys, before we continue, if you enjoy these malicious compliance stories, please don't forget to like the video and post a comment, since that would help me tremendously to fight back against the damn YouTube algorithm. I wish there would be some kind of malicious compliance to win against that. Anyway, about a month after my termination, I got a LinkedIn message from a recruiter at one of the biggest tech companies in the world. They had noticed my competitive programming ranking and wanted to talk about some opportunities. I took the call mostly out of curiosity, and they offered me a position that paid literally double what I'd been making, with stock options, full benefits, and the chance to work on genuinely interesting problems. I accepted immediately, and my former company, meanwhile, was hemorrhaging clients. The 6-hour outage had made industry news, and their reputation for reliability was tanking. 2 of their biggest banking clients announced they were exploring alternative vendors. The company's revenue projections for the quarter had to be revised down by almost 30%, and the CEO, who had been relatively hands-off during my termination because he had trusted the boss's assessment, finally started asking questions about why everything was falling apart. When he looked into it and realized that Boss had fired the company's top engineer over personality conflicts and had offered a $10 severance as an insult, he apparently went ballistic. Boss tried to defend himself by claiming I'd been insubordinate and difficult to manage, but the CEO pulled my performance reviews from before Boss arrived. In 6 years of exceptional ratings, multiple commendations, documented instances of me saving the company from major problems. Then he looked at what had happened since I left, and well, there were millions in potential lost revenue, damaged client relationships, system instabilities, and a talent exodus as other senior engineers started looking for jobs because they saw what happened to me. The math was not complicated. Boss had let his ego destroy the company's most valuable technical asset over petty power struggles. Boss was fired not long after I was. The CEO personally handled it, and from what I heard, there was no severance at all because they categorized it as termination for cause. The irony was not lost on anyone, of course, but the company's problems did not magically go away just because the awful boss was gone. They were still struggling with unstable systems, unhappy clients, and a complete inability to maintain the complex infrastructure I had built. They tried hiring consulting firms to come in and sort things out, but that just burned through money without solving the fundamental issue. Nobody understood the systems like I did. About 2 months after my termination, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. It was the CEO. He didn't waste time with small talk. He said, "We made a terrible mistake. The company's in serious trouble and I need your help." I let him talk. He explained everything I already knew, the system failures, the lost clients, the revenue problems, and then he got to the point. "I want you to come back. Name your price." I thought about it for a moment. I was happy at my new job, they appreciated my skills and paid me accordingly, but there was something appealing about the idea of going back, not to save boss, he was already gone, but to help my former colleagues who had been caught in the crossfire. "Triple my old salary," I said, "plus stock options and a seat at the technical strategy table and a formal apology for that insulting severance." There was a pause. "Done. When can you start?" "I will need to give my current employer proper notice, 2 weeks minimum. They've been good to me and I won't burn that bridge." "Fair enough. I will have the contracts drawn up." He was true to his word. The offer letter came through the next day. Triple salary, generous stock options, and a formal role as principal engineer with direct access to the executive team. No more answering to middle managers who didn't understand the technology. When I went to give notice at the new company, they were disappointed but understanding. They even told me that if things didn't work out, I'd always have a place there. That's how you treat valuable employees. My first day back at my old company was surreal. The remaining engineers were thrilled to see me. The systems were even worse than I'd heard, a total disaster zone of half-implemented fixes and workarounds that had created new problems, but that's what made it interesting. I spent the first week just doing triage, identifying the most critical issues and then implementing emergency fixes. Then I started systematically rebuilding and documenting everything properly, not just for someone with my level of expertise, but with proper knowledge transfer processes so the team could maintain things without me if needed. The CEO made good on the apology too. He sent a company-wide email explaining that my previous termination had been a serious error in judgment, that I was returning in an elevated role, and that the company was implementing new policies to ensure technical decisions were made by people with actual technical expertise. He did not name boss specifically, but everyone knew what it was about. Within 3 months, we had stabilized all the critical systems, and within 6 months, we had won back one of the major clients we had lost. The other client was gone for good, but we learned from that. My new role gave me the authority to establish proper engineering practices, code review processes, and technical mentorship programs. I hired and trained a team of strong engineers so the company would never again be dependent on a single person, even me. As for me though, I'm doing better than ever, the company is thriving again, my team is strong, and I'm paid what I'm actually worth. The moral of the story is simple: if you're going to fire someone, make sure they are actually replaceable first. Because when you tell the world's #1 ranked expert in their field that they suck and hand them a $10 severance check, you better be prepared for what happens when they take you at your word and actually leave. And the next one is another fantastic malicious compliance story, and it is titled "Cameras have to be on, no matter what." So I'm a project manager and data scientist. I manage lots of different public health related projects, but there's one project in particular that includes a really demanding team from a federal government department. I recently returned back to work from maternity leave. I work in my office 3 days a week, and on those days I have to pump breast milk at regular intervals for my baby. Luckily, I have my own private office and can usually just keep on working, emails, reports, etc., while I breast pump. I have a hands-free wearable pump, which is convenient, but still definitely obvious if I'm wearing it. It pokes out about my shirt and is not exactly silent. Recently, we had a Zoom call scheduled during one of the times I needed to pump. Instead of missing the meeting, I figured I would just keep my camera off so I could wear my pump and still participate and listen. Heck, I was even in my office and not working from home. I felt like I was being a pretty committed employee. Well, the meeting starts and a few people have their cameras off. The lead makes the announcement: "I just want to remind everyone that our expectation is that you will have your cameras on because this is not a virtual meeting. It's a simulated in-person meeting." Whatever that means. So then I sent a quick private message to explain that I was paying attention but breast pumping, no response to me, just instead "Again, the expectation is that all cameras will be on." So, fine. I turned my camera on for this meeting of about 20 people. The camera is not aimed at my chest, but certainly the top of my pump is clearly visible. I unmuted myself so you could also clearly hear the pump and just said, Thank you for your patience. I was adjusting my breast pump. The meeting continued awkwardly, with several other team managers letting me know privately it was fine to turn my camera off, but at that point, there really was no point in turning it off anymore. At the most recent meeting, the announcement was, "Please turn on your cameras if you're comfortable doing so." And the next one is titled, "Start 30 minutes later to save company money." Okay, posted on r/maliciouscompliance. So at one of the factories I worked at, we had a shift overlap. Each shift was therefore 8.5 hours, with a half-hour unpaid lunch. We had a half-hour on shift change to tell the incoming shift what was going on with the machines. A bean counter figured out how much money could be saved with this unnecessary half-hour handover time being cut, and this also cut our workday to 7.5 paid hours. They then told the lead man to coordinate the shift handover, even though there was too much information for one person to handle. Cue the malicious compliance. I strolled onto the production floor. At my new assigned start time, machines were all down, operators wait for me, a setup operator, and the lead man to discuss what needed to be done. Instead of machines running continuously, they were shut down for at least half an hour. My lead man furiously asked me why I didn't come in earlier. I told him I don't work for free. Naturally, my approach to the new way spread to the other shifts, and suddenly, people who always came in early decided they didn't want to work for free either. The factory production levels dropped, upper management asked why, several fingers were pointed at me for starting the rebellion, but nothing could be done to make us work for free. A week later, our hours were changed back. And yeah guys, thank you for watching, I will see you again tomorrow, and don't forget to subscribe to not miss any of my videos.